if we can, Tamo, we know about your translation work, we know about your curator work, about you promoting Pony, but we want to know a little bit more about you, and if you can share about your childhood, memories with your mom, and like you did share a little bit about the earlier translation. So if we can start with that.
I grew up here in Manipur, obviously. I was born here. My mother gave me a Thankul name, Somi, because I looked like a Thankul baby, I suppose, when I was born. We studied here. When people in America ask me, what school did you go to? In America, by school, they mean the university or college, right? And I used to say, I went to Little Flower School. And they would say, like, what? I said, yes, you heard me. I said, I'm a Little Flower graduate from a convent called Little Flower School, from which I studied there till about the third grade. Then I went off to boarding school in Darjeeling at a wonderful, quirky boarding school, very also American in its founding, called Mount Hermon. And there I left at the age of, I guess, 8, close to 9. And I was there until graduation for the next 8 years, coming back here. And so I've been away from Manipur for schooling, and then for my graduation from St. Stephen's College in Delhi University. And I did my postgrad from Jawaharlal Nehru University in International Studies. So that's basically my educational life, so that my first 8 years of my life I was here, and then my next 8 years of my life I was basically in Darjeeling, coming back here, and after that another 8 years in Delhi. So I'm an ABD, an all but dissertation. I was going to do my research in Chinese politics when I was drawn to New York, and I decided to come to New York because I felt that I should be in the center of the world, as I put it to my mother at the time. So that was basically what I call my second phase of my life, where I spent more than 33 years in New York. I like to say that I came to New York rather than to the United States, because it was actually the metropolis that kind of struck my imagination and drew me. And I loved New York. I just kind of immersed myself the moment I stepped off the airplane, virtually. And so I was working there as a curator of film at a museum on Park Avenue called the Asia Society. And this was before film curators even quote unquote existed. We were called programmers. And I was I think the only Asian working at the Asia Society, which is a very Tony, very blue stocking Rockefeller established institution. But that gave me my training in cultural translation, because my job was to do film programs to educate Americans about Asia. And I basically worked with almost every Asian country, from Central Asia to the Philippines to Indonesia and Japan and so on, and India, doing programs. So we started the first all year round film programming, presenting films every week, which was kind of new. And then it became a fairly cutting edge program in New York, because it became the place where the new Chinese cinema, which had emerged at the end of the 1970s, after Deng Xiaoping had taken over in China and some liberalization happened, that the new Chinese cinema, which was the most exciting thing that was happening in world cinema at the time, was the thing that actually became the core of my work, because that was really what what was happening in world cinema at the time. So I worked largely with China and with Taiwan and with Hong Kong, and then gradually from there to Korea and to Japan and then Southeast Asia. And fairly late in my career, I actually approached India. And we did Indian programs here. And from then on, as a curator of Asian cinema in America, I worked for other museums as well who had asked me to do exhibitions for them, like the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Whitney Museum of American Art, and for which I did the first Indian American programming, what we call Desi Americans. And so we did fairly new cutting edge programs there, introducing Asian American programming to Asia Society, which was largely involved with traditional classical Asian culture. So being the only Asian at the time over there, as an Asian American, I was actually involved in bringing out Asian American work into the mainstream of American culture. And my next phase turned out to be working with digital media in the late 90s and nonfiction forms. And so I started working with the Flaherty Film Foundation and the Flaherty Film Seminar. And so we did work on artists working with artificial intelligence and with interactive media and with the confluence of the media art forms of digitality that was coming over, addressing also the issues of the digital divide at the time. It seems so long ago. This is like in the late 90s already.